sustainability goals without breaking the bank. My name is Neil. I've introduced myself already, but I'm going to do so again. So I'm from confidenceMCs.com, and one of our founding pillars is sustainability. So we provide a network of elite professional MCs, moderators, and facilitators to anyone that needs them for meetings of 6 to 6,000. But we do so on a sustainable thing, so we place MCs with an approximate location to where an MC is needed. So you wouldn't catch me flying over to Sydney, for example, when actually we've got some perfectly good MCs there already. So that's how we operate sustainably. We've got a short film to start off from one of our partners, the London Convention Bureau, about how they do sustainability. Do go and visit the London Convention Bureau. They're situated outside. As event professionals, we can all make more sustainable choices in how we go about things. And it starts about understanding what sustainability is, knowing where those quick wins are, and then knowing where the more strategic kind of goals that we should be placing are. It's, knowing what the sustainable development goals are, how we can embed those into our businesses, and how we go about our daily lives. So, I'm going to introduce our moderator for this session, Anna Abdunor, CEO and co-founder of ILA, the independent industry body supporting the event sector transition to a more sustainable future in line with global net zero targets. Anna, over to you.
Thank you. Hello, hi, thanks everybody. I'm Anna, and I'd love to welcome up the panel today. We're going to be talking about achieving sustainability goals without breaking the bank, hopefully. And I'd love to be joined by Richard, Patrick and Amy, if you want to pop up on up, and we'll do some quick intro. So, this way. Yeah. Thank you. Do you each want to just give a short introduction, who you are and your role, and then we'll kind of do a bit more of a deep dive. But, Amy?
Yeah, so I'm Amy Underdown. I'm Head of Events and Marketing at Oxford Analytica. Not to be confused, please, with Cambridge Analytica. We are Oxford Analytica. So we're a geopolitical advisory firm based in Oxford.
My name's Patrick Ockenden, not James. Don't know where that's come from. So I'm a client development director representing the collective by BCD M&E. My focus is ensuring that we're aligning our clients with solutions today and also what we need to do in the future, so very much focused on sustainability. I sit on the sustainability committee within our organisation, and that's around about 15 individuals that are based globally as well, so quite a bit of interaction rounds with our counterparts around the globe.
Hi everyone, I'm Richard Boone. I'm Managing Director of Webmart, not to be confused with Walmart. And we're a sustainable marketing agency. I've been going 26 years. We are trying to transform marketing to a sustainable future, and we get involved mostly with marketing communications across printed marketing, digital marketing, creative and data. And we work with quite a lot of high street retail and event organisations as well, you guys.
Thank you. So just before we kick off, can I just ask how many people are buyers in the room? Just put your hand up. Great. And event service businesses? Suppliers? And great, okay, thank you. So can I just ask everybody just to take a minute and have a little think about something recently, or in the last 6 months or so, that you spent money on that was more than you would usually be comfortable with. So maybe it was a pair of shoes, maybe it was a houseplant or a nice meal out. Just have a little think, take 15 seconds, something that you spent money on that was a bit more than you might usually. You guys can do it too. Has everybody thought of something? Yeah. So I'm just going to ask from one or two. You don't have to say what you bought, but just a question on like what was your justification, or how did you justify spending that little bit of extra money? Anybody who wants to? Yeah, in the green scarf.
I bought an Udi because it was freezing.
What's an Udi?
It's one of those massive pullover jumper blanket things.
Because it was freezing.
Yeah.
And how did you justify that spend? Just because you were cold? Or?
I didn't want to spend money on the heating, so it was kind of counterbalancing thing.
And she wears it a lot as well on
I
calls.
Yeah.
College.
So justifiable. Anyone else? Anyone else got? Yeah, in the stripy sleeves.
I went for a more luxury chalet for my skiing holiday this year, and it's because I haven't been for 3 years.
Haven't been for a few years. Thank you. Anybody else? In the red shirt?
Yeah, I went for a more expensive outfit.
Yeah.
And the justification was I deserved it.
Good for you. Great, thank you. Just kind of get thinking about like why we spend money, how we justify certain spends, like where we might spend a little bit extra, what's the value that we're placing behind it, whether that's because it's something that we deserve, and whether it's something that we want to kind of reward ourselves with, or better quality, or looking for the kind of opportunities. Cost per use, you might spend more because you tend to keep it for the next few years. I bought a jacket about 8 years ago that was about 6 or 7 times I might normally spend on a jacket, but I still have it and I still wear it because I love it. So just kind of reframing this idea around where we spend money, kind of that value-based idea that we tend to spend a bit more if we understand the reason that we're doing it and can see the value in why we're doing it. Very quick to spend £3 or £5 here and there, but actually when it comes to laying down the extra cash. Great. So I just kind of want to kick off with a question to each of you, and Richard, I'll start with you. What kind of makes you sort of qualified to sit on this panel? What's your experience of sustainability? Why are you here that you're able to kind of talk about sustainability initiatives and implementing those without breaking the bank?
Sure. So I feel qualified because as a managing director, I have to manage 10 different disciplines around business, from technology, finance, marketing, sales, customer service. And so across each of those, and basically my history as an MD started the week before the pandemic, so it's fair to say I've only known chaos. But actually, for the last 3 years, I've really managed to acquire quite a lot of experience in terms of the operations of a business, because literally the rule book got ripped up. And I've transformed the agency through to a B Corp. I don't know, show of hands in the room, anyone heard of what the B Corp movement is? Okay, so quite a few people, which is great. So for those of you who don't know, B Corps, there's 1,000 in the UK now. We just celebrated 1,000 B Corps in the UK. And we're part of a collective of businesses, everything from Patagonians of the world in clothing through to sustainable marketing agencies such as ourselves. And we stand for the highest standards of governance, people development, environmental impact, and basically doing good with profit as well. Looking beyond profitability and turnover and shareholder value, and looking at stakeholder value around the business in different ways. So that's where I get my experience from. I also work with a lot of high street brands, people like Cook Foods, Moonpig, etc. So I get to see a lot of different businesses and how they operate. So that's my credibility.
Thank you. Patrick?
Yeah, so my experience is obviously within the event industry. Being a client development director, I'm speaking regularly with clients from various different sectors, and one of their pain points is sustainability, and how us as an agency can support them on that journey. And I think I've had experience of working with the likes of Isla, and I think at this stage we've talked a lot about it. There's the awareness piece and there's the educational element, and now we've got the tools there to actually support our clients. So I'm really an advocate for pushing sustainability and actually making some positive change for our clients rather than talking about it and doing a tick box. So that's my focus. It's a passionate topic for me.
So I obviously am coming from the event planner, the in-house event planner, so that corporate perspective, and I'm one of the key stakeholders that sits around the table making these different decisions about what venues we want to pick, what print companies, what marketing agencies we want to use. So it's sort of the buck lies with me in terms of making those decisions of, do we prefer to choose a B Corp certified company over one that's not. So I very much have that seat around the table within this. We also over at Oxford Analytica have an ESG monitor as one of our service products. So we sort of tell our clients, advise our clients on how to be sustainable in their approach in terms of the geopolitical impact and the environment that's happening. So we're trying not to be the situation of cobbler's shoes, sort of trying to embed that into our current organisation and how we best do that. So we've got a sustainability group within the wider company, so our parent company, Fiscal Note, which is a fiscal policy based in America. There's probably about 15 brands now associated with Fiscal Note. Oxford Analytica is one of many. So as part of that group, we have a sustainability arm, and I sit within that group discussing how we're using the different solutions, ESG solutions that we have as part of the different brands, and how we can move that into the company that we're doing, as opposed to just advising our clients on what's best for them to do.
We talked about Oxford Analytica and the collective both have like sustainability working groups or kind of hubs that you're operating with. Do you have something similar, Webmar?
Yeah, we have a sustainability committee, but also the way that we align sustainability in the business is to look cross-department and across the hierarchy. So we have a lot of involvement through to, like on our scopes 1 and 2, we have business improvements, so solar panels, electric cars, etc. We also oversee 165 acres of Scotland that we purchased as part of the eco-transformation, where we're planting new trees, putting in new ponds, and that's all of the staff in the business can get involved in those improvements. So whilst we have a sustainability committee as a B Corp, one of the main things that's slightly different is trying to look across the entire business and align KPIs across different departments, not just in senior leadership.
Yeah, and actually I think that's interesting that everyone's talking about having that working group, that committee on board, and actually, it's a discipline, isn't it?
Yeah.
So in the same way that you might have strategy, finance, marketing, etc., actually it forms a core part of what you're doing. So we're able to look at, from the experience that we've got up here, we're able to look at things from an operational perspective and actually senior decision making. As MD, you get to decide what you're going to do from within the kind of buyer perspective and really owning that budget and controlling it and being able to make purchasing decisions. And then from kind of the supply chain agency side of things, actually being able to address some of those requests from the clients, so we can kind of talk across different disciplines. You've talked about KPIs and having them across the business. Do you want to talk a little bit about KPIs and how you think about them, how you factor them in, how important they are? And I mean, I talk about KPIs all the time. I think they're really important for helping us measure and reduce. But from your side, how important and valuable are they with regards to sustainability initiatives?
Yeah, I think obviously very important, but it's the transparency that's been a big part of what we brought to Webmar in terms of reporting on those goals. So every time we have a monthly gathering with the business, it brings everyone together. We also have our quarterly reporting as well, and then our annual reports. And so what we look to try and do is create KPIs that kind of navigate us towards that long-term journey. What I've noticed is there's been a lot of short-termism in terms of leadership, in terms of there's always that next crisis, and so speaking as an MD, I would say there's a huge amount of pressure put on leadership at the moment to navigate compounding factors that aren't going away. These are being described as a perma-crisis because it's simply just these things, everything since the pandemic, supply chain shortages, staffing, it's really starting to layer on top and these things aren't going away. They might be lesser now, maybe potentially when they first came around. So it's really important for us to not lose sight of that long-term goal. And we tend to work in kind of a 3-year business cycle. And then what we do is with KPIs is we look across department, how can we break down across scopes 1, 2, and 3? What skills do we need from different disciplines to achieve it? One of the other challenges on the KPI side of things, talking about the negative side of it, is the fact that, as you've seen, we all have different ways of approaching it with committees, is because sustainability tends to be shared across disciplines. So therefore, when you're leading a business and trying to lead change, and the KPI can be owned by multiple departments, that makes it really challenging to try and drive it forwards, because typically you're looking for accountability, and accountability across several people is really challenging, because within each of those disciplines they'll have the day-to-day that's pulling them into different projects that might be more specific to do, let's say, for our tech team, for example. There are pressures put on the tech team to achieve their business as usual day-to-day KPIs, let alone the sustainability one that they're sharing. So I think we've taken quite a big step as a company to try and set KPIs that are achievable, reporting on it transparently, and also working as an MD, as a leader, to try and remove blockers, because it's pretty obvious when you get sort of 3-6 months in and you're not making impact against a KPI, then potentially we have to look at what we're trying to measure.
Can you give an example of a KPI within your business?
Give you an example?
Yeah,
sure.
What does it look like when you
Like a really basic example was kind of looking at our company fleet emissions, so setting 100% reduction of petrol or diesel emissions as a business across our whole fleet. And so before we even set that, we said, is it attainable? If so, when? And there's a huge investment we need to make in terms of moving to electric vehicles, cycle to work schemes, looking at our transport options for events as well as for attending speeches and things like we have today. There is a carbon cost to that. So setting that KPI at 100%, we have to be really sure, is it something that is attainable before we go and set these world-shattering sustainability things of complete elimination of carbon emissions. So setting that over 3 years we felt was attainable. Looking at it, we made a 70% reduction in the first year, because all of a sudden we started moving towards that goal. We were very happy with a 70% completion in the first year. To get to 100%, that leaves us with the most difficult 30%, typically of potentially people still in company car leases for a period of time. So that's why spreading it over sort of a 2 to 3 year, I think there's a common misconception with the KPI that typically you're trying to sort of, sustainability is very complex, and it comes down to breaking down these decisions, and every decision makes an impact.
Yeah. Thank you. Does people here know their company KPIs when it comes to sustainability? Do you know if your company has KPIs that you're working towards? Put your hand up if you do. Could put your hand up a bit further. All the way up if you've got them. Celebrate it. Right up, straight arms. Okay. So that your company has KPIs, and for those people that put their hands up, do you actually know what those KPIs are and how your role lands up to supporting them? Few hands. Okay. So there's clearly a gap between having a KPI and understanding what the role is within that to support it at company level. You talked a bit about blockers. It'd be interesting to understand if you've got any KPIs within the events division that your own KPIs that you set that you're working with, whether that's for your event deliveries or whether that's around the kind of suppliers that you might be working with.
Yeah, so we actually spoke about this on our pre-panel call, didn't we? And I think it's essentially, in general, yes, we do have KPIs around sustainability. Whether they're strictly managed from above is questionable. And that's definitely something that I would like to bring in, probably within this year, is to actually say, hang on a sec, we do have these KPIs, but if we don't hit them, that's actually a problem, that's then an issue, and depending what those KPIs are, and making sure that they're deliverable, achievable, and it's not completely out of the realm of things, you then say, well, okay, if that's achievable, why aren't we doing it? And if it's something that's a small change, then definitely let's embed it. But how is that then filtered down? And if I then stepped away from my position, who is then taking that on? Who's driving that forward if I'm not there? So it definitely is something that needs to be fed down from from top down. And I think I could probably talk from a lot of in-house corporates there. Oh, I don't know if that's me. I could probably talk from a lot of in-house corporates where we're all experiencing the same. We have in the back of our mind KPIs on sustainability, but how do you prioritise that against the cost of venues and suppliers and different demands that we're all up against? Where does sustainability fit within that chain if it's not being dictated from above?
Can I ask a question? Maybe a bit challenging, but as head of events and marketing, is that not dictated by you?
It is, which is why I want to bring it in this year. But you still need the other senior leadership team around the table to agree with that.
And those are your stakeholders that are bringing
Yeah.
those events, bringing those budgets to you to deliver against them.
Yeah.
Okay. And blockers for you, so obviously we've got a blocker of sort of being able to say, yes, we want to be able to do this, but it needs endorsement and it needs that endorsement from leadership. And I guess if you're saying, what happens if you leave? How do we build that into people's R&Rs and expectations and their roles and responsibilities? But for you, Patrick, what are the blockers?
I suppose we're dealing with procurement on a regular basis, and they come out with these, from an RFP perspective, there's a lot around about sustainability, and it seems that that's, at the moment, just a tick box exercise, and then when it gets handed down to the corporate event planner, sustainability may not even be on that person's radar or part of their agenda, and they may not have KPIs. So usually they've got a KPI of, here's your budget, fit that event experience within that budget, tick, done. So for us, we're there trying to support our clients and saying, well, look, we can actually put some goals and KPIs out there. We've now got some of the tools, and our supply chain has come on leaps and bounds to actually tackle some of these challenges, albeit starting small and then working more long term. I suppose it's about actually getting people to start having KPIs against their event programs, rather than not.
Yeah. And do you have an initiative within your organisation to be setting those? Do you have something blanket that you're working with that you kind of try and build into each project, or is that a work in progress?
I suppose one of the first things is, once you get that brief in, we're always asking them, saying, well, if there's sustainability isn't mentioned, we then ask the questions. We now have to ask the questions of our clients. What are your goals? Usually they're not aware of their own corporate goals, so it's that educational piece. And it's
reverse education.
yeah. But obviously we are the experts within the event industry, so we need to be kind of that consultative approach to our clients and taking those ideas and solutions to them.
So for people who pop their hands up, say you were kind of from the supply chain side of it, how often are you experiencing something similar where it'll come through in an RFP, or it'll come through kind of as a bit of an exercise, can you support us with sustainability, and then that never following through with the client? Show of hands. Quite frequently, it would seem. Okay. And where, out of interest, where do you see the responsibility lying? Is it with the client to enforce it, or do you think it's sitting with yourselves to kind of push back upwards? Hands up with the client.
I think it's both.
Oh, it's collaboration, isn't it?
Good answer, guys. Okay, thank you. So one of the things I guess we've talked about is a little bit around, you kind of got this tick box exercise in procurement, kind of want to engage your stakeholders, need to be looking at it across lots of disciplines of the business. That's really around how are you communicating, what's the education and the knowledge growth and development, professional development for people, and how you're recruiting people into the business. How much do you think the knowledge gap is actually a barrier to delivering solutions or delivering against KPIs, rather than necessarily there not being any solutions? I don't know, you're nodding away. Richard.
Yeah, I need to say this one, because I do sit in with client pitches on occasion, and I also work with our supply chain. So I think having that holistic view, one of the big goals that I've set for the next 3 years is to help carbon literacy around the business. You can't all be trying to set KPIs and own them across both sides if you're all talking different language. And one of the big challenges we face in the marketing communications field is, with sustainability, there's degrees, it's a spectrum. It's not black and white. It's not, like you said about the tick box. It's kind of like, how many points is this worth on the RFP? And actually, comparing suppliers, we talked pre-panel about sort of EcoVadis and various ways to measure sustainability. B Corp having a scoring system as well. But I think it's kind of like, if you're comparing a green solution with a green solution, which is going to have the biggest impact? And I think to really truly understand sustainability, there's a level of carbon literacy that businesses need to conduct business-wise. You know, we look at DE&I, we look at various other things in terms of educating our teams. I think across the hierarchy we need to have carbon literacy, otherwise we're all talking completely different terminology. Is it to sequester carbon? Is it to abate carbon? Does it even that word that people even know what it is? It's kind of like actually a basic level of carbon literacy is I think, fundamental for all business, I think.
What's your take on that, Patrick? Because obviously you've worked in people and talent development and kind of bring people on board and operating with the sustainability committee.
I suppose the key from an internal perspective is making sure our ops teams and account teams and production are all aware of what sustainability is, what it means to the clients, what it means to them as an individual, and taking them on that journey, and making sure that they're skilled and upskilling them on the topic so that they can understand it, but also they can communicate confidently to clients, confidently to suppliers, to find out that we're providing the right solutions to kind of meet the objectives. And also when you chuck in different generations, we've got, usually it's our younger individuals within the collective that are really focused on sustainability, whereas our older ones are a bit more dinosaurs and potentially aren't that keen to provide a change. But yeah, those different generations have got different purposes in life. So.
How many people here have been through some kind of climate or sustainability or carbon training or education? How many people would like to go through something like that? Okay. It's good to know, some people don't care. That's not okay, but it's also okay. Everybody's got different interests, so I don't want to be too judgmental about it. But no, so I think education is a big one. We talk about when you kind of get down into sustainability strategy and developing a strategy, whether that's for an event, whether that's overarching business, or whether it's government policy, ultimately you're looking at kind of the different stakeholder groups that you're working with. So it might be the audience, it might be the supply chain, it might be the venue. But one of the big things when you're developing your sustainability strategy is looking at kind of what you can control and what money are you spending, and what control do you have over that money, what are you influencing, and where can you find the opportunities, and then actually that kind of value chain engagement, the wider space. So how important is it to be using your voice and authority to influence as a corporate buyer? What do you see your role? What do you see your role being? How do you work with your supply chain? And is that something that you see yourself being able to engage in positively, or is it something that is just kind of considered as an add-on?
Yeah, I think my role probably within this is very much that influencer. So I very much influence the senior leadership team on our budgets and what decisions we then make. I am then the key buyer in terms of choosing that venue and choosing that supplier. So I probably play quite a predominant role within this situation. But I feel that on the event planner side, it's still dependent on where your passion lies. So if you have a passion for sustainability, then you will go on that journey and you will educate, you'll understand, you'll learn. I mean, it's probably quite a biased audience here today in this room. We're probably all the same, but how do you then motivate those people that aren't here today, that are sat at home and it's not their passion, but they still play a very similar role, but how do you make it the norm and it's not something that's a nice to have or a tick box exercise, which I think it's not anymore. It's more important than that, and how do you embed that into society as a whole, not just the events industry, but we can start with the events industry.
I mean, we're really siloed as an industry, because I think if you take some of what recently at the World Economic Forum, pre-forum, the risk report that came out, I think it was 7 out of 10 of the longer term risks are climate-related risks. And in the next 2 years, I think 5 or 6 of them were around climate-related risks, whether it's adverse weather events, mass migration, loss and damage, those sorts of things. We, as an events industry, we are quite siloed off from what's happening in the wider world. How important do you think it is to be bringing those sorts of things in, Richard? Like, assessing those risks against business, against activity. If you think about the floods that have recently happened in Auckland, I mean, the major events happen in Auckland City. Like, are you going to take your event there if they're going to experience climate-related flooding every year, that sort of thing? I mean, how do we balance those things out? How do we bring some of the outside in to the conversation? It's a big question.
It's quite a big question with quite a lot of power behind it, because it's kind of like there's that famous saying, you can't make money if the world's on fire. I know that's really extreme, but then you give isolated examples of where you're unable to have any revenue. I mean, the cost presumably of cancelling an event that you planned. You look at the World Cup in Japan with the heavy weather. Economically, that must have a massive impact, and we've seen the impact of even the winds. I'm not a massive football supporter, but looking at what happened with the football with the end of last year, it boosted the economy. They said possibly one of the only reasons why we didn't dip into this doom and gloom, I don't know, use the R word, that we're all trying to see in the news. So I think it's kind of like when you look at events, they have a massive impact on a country's morale, they have a massive impact on the economy, and actually, if we're in a world where we're constantly having to navigate around that climate change, if I translate it to kind of, look at digital marketing, it's got 5% of global emissions. That's as big as the airline industry, and we talk about reducing flights. You look at the energy consumption within digital marketing, and it's just, we're taking something that's visible in marketing and putting it in something that's invisible and saying, oh yeah, we've made things now free for the environmentally slower cost, it's all digital, and actually we're just piling it under the carpet. And you look at Google's data centers, went down in the summer in London, 40 degrees plus in the UK, we broke that barrier, it's here. And so I think it's kind of, to finish on it was a big question, to finish on a big thing, it's kind of like, we've been talking about the thing, and it's here now, and it's, instead of talking about it now, we need to be doing the thing, we need to be getting on with it. Yeah. And so I think it's not just solid to the event industry. I think it's something that if we don't take it seriously, we're going to need risk and mitigation plans for events based on climate. And I know it probably comes into contingency plans, but it's going to become a core composite of planning events. And there's a huge cost to that.
Yeah, which kind of brings us on to that conversation about breaking the bank. So anyone got any top tips on how we solve this problem without breaking the bank? No, but I think it does kind of come onto the question, is that for a long time sustainability is talked about as an expense. It's an add-on if there's extra budget. How do you bill it? Do you bill it to clients? Do you bill it as a line item? Do you build it into your budget? Is it people hours? Is it technology hours? Is it, what does it look like? Is it extra recycling fees? I mean, all of these questions around how we cost for sustainability, I mean, those are just a handful of ones that I can pull out of thin air of what I've heard. But to this point around kind of mitigation, risk mitigation, needing to put plans into place, the concerns around whether or not we need to cancel events and the cost of that. We know what it looked like in COVID when, no insurance for those sorts of things and huge losses. So how does that can we marry up that narrative of this is going to cost money and an investment does need to be made with conversations like this? How do we do it without breaking the bank? Are we kind of barking up the wrong tree?
Obviously, it depends on what scale of event you're talking about, essentially. But a different angle of it could be, okay, well, we are gonna spend more on this event because we want it to be fully sustainable. Could you then put that additional money that you're going to spend more on a PR strategy behind delivering and saying this is the first time that we've delivered? I was going to say London Fashion Week, obviously not my background, but for example, London Fashion Week, thinking that fashion culture is not the most sustainable industry in the world. But yeah, it's essentially then saying, well, can we make that the most sustainable event that we've ever delivered, and therefore putting a PR campaign behind it, as opposed to just saying, well, actually that costs too much, we're not going to do it? Could you view that budget that you're spending slightly differently to sort of enable you to be able to spend those budgets and just try and sell that idea differently to your key stakeholders? And again, probably goes back to the piece that we were talking about educating, making sure that everyone is on the same page and maybe going back and starting from scratch and then saying, okay, now we're all on the same page, we all are singing from the same hymn sheet, we understand. What then happens next? Where do we then allocate those budgets?
Patrick, have you got any thoughts?
From an agency perspective, it's the way that utopia for us would be to work with time with clients, so planning out quite far out in advance, but also having full visibility of their event programme and being able to say, well, look, the CEO really wants to do that incentive for 100 of his top sales individuals, and they know it delivers ROI from a sales perspective, but look, the emissions are really bad. But then we can say, well, look, you've got this event over here, let's turn that virtual, and then the savings that we're making there kind of almost offset against you still doing that that incentive and the impact that it delivers internally. So I think for us as an agency, yeah, we want to work with full visibility, and I think there's another key thing is we talked about working in silos. Lots of clients work in silos, and there's stuff where you've got marketing department's got this event kit, but the sales department over here aren't aware of it, and it's kind of having a holistic view and creating the awareness to say, well, look, there's this kit here, let's utilise it, sweat the assets, rather than you then buying another bit of asset or branding that's used for one event and that's it. So just thinking differently.
How does that impact your ROI?
Uh,
Well, I mean, that's the bit, you know, these are all solutions and actually there's opportunities and all of that, but how, you know, how does that impact things?
But the key thing is the event industry is such a competitive market. So for us, we need to be sticky with our clients, showing that we're the right partner to them, showing them the expertise within this sector. And I think that's a long-term vision, a long-term relationships. We don't want to work on an ad hoc basis. We want to go on a journey with the clients, and as a client development director, we've got to keep seeing what those new trends are, what those new challenges are that our clients are facing, and work with them.
It's quite interesting because I think this is a nice panel because a year or 2 years ago we might have been talking about, I don't know where to start, I don't know where I'm meant to start, and actually a couple of years on, and obviously Patrick, we've been working together quite a while, but it becomes that piece around like, oh, we've got some ideas, we've got some solutions. Like change is slow, and change happening at, you know, across an entire sector, across an entire industry is going to happen slowly unless we get like a big piece of legislation in, you know, that's going to force us to change the way. And actually there's a big part about getting there before that legislation comes in, because we know it's going to hit. Whether it hits in 2 years' time or 5 years' time, it's going to come in. But it's really nice to see the conversation shifting from we don't know where to start, but we know that we need to start, to okay, well, we're not there yet. We haven't, you know, actually got the runway to go and deliver some of these things yet, but we know what they are going to be when we get our foot in the door, and that's really exciting.
I was going to say, in the supply chain, that's what we've seen in the last 2 years. Before, we were going to the supplier saying, look, we need a sustainable solution. Now they're coming to us with those solutions, which is a huge shift. So.
Yeah, and I think it's incremental and it's small, and you don't necessarily see it happening, but it is happening, which is really great. Any questions from the audience? I think we're out of time. I don't actually know what time it is. 5 minutes. Any questions for the panellists on anything we've talked about? Obviously, operationalising things, leadership buy-in, education, breaking down of silos, investment maybe over short-term wins. Anything from anyone?
I'll shout.
He's loud.
Thank you. For the four of you, what's the one thing do you think that we could take to our clients and help us on board with the process that won't cost us or them breaking down? What's one message maybe we can take to them?
Should we start with?
Start
As a decision maker.
Yeah, I mean, great question. I think it's definitely starting that process early. So making sure that you're talking about your sustainability goals and your sustainability outcomes very early on in your event planning process, and not thinking the night before, oh, hang on a minute, we have got an agenda that's on the app, so we haven't printed it, so that solved that problem. It's sort of embedding it much early on into that customer journey.
Right, also think there's actually a big part about what Patrick said, which is like, what's your programme? How do we work? You know, it's that stickiness. How do we understand what you're doing? Because that's great that you've got that ambition, but does that stack up across all of your event programme and everything you're saying, and you know, your events team and the different divisions that might be delivering it? Because actually, once you get that visibility, that's, you know, that is that foot in the door piece.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about whose responsibility is it, it's you're working in collaboration with your clients. And I think before it used to be that they put the onus potentially on the agency to come up with it, but now we've got to work more consultative with our clients and show that we are that stickiness. So I think it's being open and honest and it's working two ways as well. Not just your clients being open and honest, but you being open and honest and having those tough kind of conversations with your clients. So collaboration also.
Yeah, I agree with everything these guys said, but I would say one of the things would be, if you look at, certainly in our world, when you're agreeing with a new customer, KPIs, or really what's the vision of why are you being picked? And I think if you're looking at sustainability, is there a shared thing that you can both report on both sides and say, look, it's a little higher than maybe where we are today, it's within reach, it's a stretch, and let's keep reporting, whether it's quarterly, on how we're making steps to get there. Break it down, because it tends to be sustainability seen as this kind of, it has to be perfect or not at all. And I think actually breaking it down to say, it'd be really nice if we got to here, and you agree that with the customer or supplier, share that challenge. And I think going back to the decision-making thing you were saying, it's like if your challenge is getting senior leadership to buy into spending that much more money, bringing it also with the agency to say, these are the steps that they're taking to reduce the cost. It might not be perfect, they've managed to, we've set a tall challenge for the agency to reach this type of event that's going to be a little bit more greener. It's not perfect, but over the course of, say, like you said, the longer term plan, we will get to that longer term plan rather than it be really unattainable goals.
Thank you. One more question, if there's one more in the room. Yeah, green scarf. Sorry, I don't know.
That's fine. So, when you look at suppliers, they are to reach sustainability goals. Why is that word so hard?
It is hard.
They should make it easier. They are doing things like when you book food, it's sourced from local area. When you have food, you supply for less people, so you're getting less food wastage. When you have water in the room, instead of buying new bottles every time, you have glass and you refill it. Now, isn't all of that cost saving to the suppliers? So, I guess my question is, where is all this extra money having to be spent?
Great question. I think that some of that also depends on kind of the strategy that you're putting into place. Those are tactics, and absolutely, like a lot of the time, it's around efficiency, and actually there are cost savings in place. And you know, a lot of the tactics that you can employ, whether that's, you know, reducing your print so that you don't have so much print waste, that saves you money, you know, or this is just efficiency, and actually a lot of the time discussing sustainability tactics is around efficiency, and that's, you know, we talk about that a lot, and, you know, at ILA around kind of decisions you can make and how it can shift and change things. But then when you're coming into those longer term strategies, actually we know, well, not everybody necessarily does, but the transition, our net zero and our circular economy transition does require investment. It does need financing because we're looking at infrastructural changes, being able to, for example, I was working with a panel the other day, venues looking to retrofit, so, you know, take out gas systems and implement induction kitchens so that you can use electricity, renewable energy. That's a major investment. Now that's at a venue level, not necessarily at an event planning level, but it becomes the same as well, actually, if you are hosting 500 events, you know, as a corporate, you know, in-house team. Where are they happening? Where can you make the, you know, where do you need to invest in kit, touring kit, for example, that is more easily transportable, transformable, transportable, those sorts of things. They do, when you're looking at that longer term strategy, that longer term 3-year KPI, that kind of ambition that you're working towards, it may well require financial investment, but you can balance those two things out. There's that longer term and that shorter term, and those two things are, you know, they work together really well. So I think, to your point, absolutely, there's efficiencies and savings in efficiency, and then there's longer term looking at that. How do we invest in this strategy, whether it's people, tools, you know, infrastructure, I would say.
And it is saving money in one view, but it's also convincing the person that it can save money. So try and convince a CEO of a multi-core to not take their private jet to Scotland from London. It's tough.
If you do, I'll link it to the press. Yeah, great. Thank you. I mean, I think I'm sure the rest of everybody's here. If you've got any other questions, you can find our panelists and ask them in person yourself. But thank you very much. Yes, I don't think that necessarily answers the goal about sustainability without breaking the bank, but hopefully it was an interesting conversation with us. Thank you.